Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story. I sold my blood on the dark web. I didn't know blood had value. Sure, it has the value of saving a life, but when it came to donating, whenever I went to a blood bank, the most I'd get was a few cookies. College was proving more expensive than I had originally thought. Ramen noodles had become a staple meal in my life, and I struggled to hold any work down with my study. Whenever I was cramming on the last night for an exam, I'd get calls to come in, and I'd have to decline, which pretty much lead to me never getting shifts again. One night, I was clicking deeper and deeper through the dark web. I had a fascination to see what stores people had set up, what they were selling, and how much for. I never bought anything or even entertained the thought of buying anything because I had no money anyway. I found a link titled Blood for Bitcoin. Donors needed. I clicked through and landed to the page. There was a list of blood types with a value per 100 ml. And it was paying heaps. My jaw dropped. I knew I was AB negative, and I looked at how much they were paying. For $125 per 100 milliliters. Some of the other blood types were much less in value. O positive, which I guess was the most common, was only $10 per 100 milliliters. There wasn't much else to see on the page, but there was a contact form for people interested in donating. Without much thinking, I opened the contact form and filled it in. It just wanted to know what blood type, my email, and if I had any diseases. I filled it out and hit submit. I then left the site and kept looking through other shops, mostly at the price of drugs, even though I didn't use myself, but the fantasy of being some kind of Pablo Escobar crossed my mind sometimes. A few minutes later, I received a new email. The subject line was Blood for Bitcoin. I clicked open, and it was a reply to the form I filled out. It said, "Thank you for your interest. We want your blood type. Please reply with the following: your Bitcoin wallet, your address. On Tuesday in 1 week, put a 100 milliliters vial of your blood in your letterbox before midnight, and we will collect it. Once we have collected it, we will transfer $425 in Bitcoin to your wallet address. If you do not leave the blood in your letterbox that night, we will not contact you again. If your blood is not of quality, we will not collect again." There was also an Amazon link to buy a kit for taking blood at home, and a YouTube link to a video on how to take your own blood. Very interesting. I thought, this might be for real. I replied back to the email. I asked if I could post it to an address instead of it being collected from my letterbox. Within moments, I received a reply. No. Days in post and temperature changes will ruin the blood. Provide your address and Bitcoin wallet address, and we will collect Tuesday night from your letterbox next week. I thought for a moment and wasn't comfortable using my address. But there was an elderly man who lived next door, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me using his letterbox in the middle of the night. I replied back, "Okay, sounds good," and provided his address and my Bitcoin wallet address. I then went and ordered the blood kit from Amazon, which had a next-day delivery. Time went on until it reached Tuesday night. At about 9, I was sure the neighbor had gone to sleep, so it was time to draw my blood. ID watched the video and had blood taken at donors before, so had a rough idea. I put the needle in and blood started to draw to the vial. I ordered some 120 milliliters vials, so I filled it up close to the top before pulling the needle out and applying some pressure with a cotton ball. I snuck outside to the neighbor's letterbox, lifted the top, and dropped the vial in. I quickly slipped back into my house while looking around to make sure the coast was clear. I went back to my room and played some games for a while. They said to do it by midnight, so I guess that means they won't come by until after then. I intended to stay up as late as I could and try see the person who came to get it, unless it's all a joke from some troll on the dark web. Worst case, my neighbor will find a vial of blood in his letterbox in the morning. I turned all the lights off in my house just before midnight and sat by my bedroom window with the curtains slightly ajar so I could see the letterbox. To kill time, I just sat on my phone, occasionally messaging people and scrolling Reddit. Just after 1, I noticed the street light flicker as if something had blocked some of the light for a moment. I looked over the road and saw a tall figure dressed head to toe in black swiftly cross the road and walk to my neighbor's letterbox. It was wearing a black hoodie, but from what little I could glimpse from the streetlights, its face and hands were a pale white. It popped the lid of the neighbor's letterbox, grabbed the vial and inspected it for a moment, and then finally turned around, crossing the road back into the darkness. I closed the curtains completely and went and laid in my bed. I was a mixture of excited that I might actually get paid some money, but also disturbed after seeing its pale appearance and wondering what it wanted with the blood. The next morning I awoke to a new email. It said, "Delicious. I will collect 200 milliliters next Tuesday. Do not reply. Your payment has been made." I checked my Bitcoin wallet and it was up just over $425 that was mentioned. Once again, I was excited that I had now actually got paid, but now even more disturbed after reading the word delicious. Was it eating my blood? Even if it is, the money is worth it enough to turn a blind eye. The week passed to the next Tuesday. I filled up 2 vials and put them out in my neighbor's letterbox. I waited by my window peeking through the curtains, and just after 1 the tall pale figure came through and collected it. The next morning I checked my wallet and it was up a further $850 in value. There was another email. It only said, "Delicious. More. 500 milliliters." As creepy as this was, that would be $2,125, and I was overly excited. At this point, I didn't care if it was eating my blood. That was 2 months of food and rent to me, and I could probably get some new clothes and some new games off Steam. I ordered some more vials off Amazon and waited out the week. This time, I did 5 vials. It felt like a lot, and seeing that much blood come out of me felt surreal. I know they do just a bit less than that each time I've given blood in the past, but doing it myself made me really anxious, and I was getting a bit lightheaded watching myself do it. I dropped it off again and watched the same thing show up and collect it. The payment came through the next morning, followed by another email. "Delicious. Next must be 1 liter. 1 liter is a lot. But at the same time, it's $4,250, which is a lot of money." I Google searched if it's possible for me to do, and it looks like it would be without being fatal, but there was definitely risks involved. I'd already given 800 milliliters over the last 3 weeks. I decided to go ahead with it and ordered 10 more empty vials off Amazon. If I did this, this would be the last time, or at least the last time for a while. The following Tuesday, I prepped for it. I made sure I had some sugary cookies and water handy. I felt lightheaded last time, so this would take a lot out of me. I sat on my bed, inserted the needle, and started to fill vial after vial. After about 7 vials, I was feeling lightheaded and felt I was going pale. The blood comes out so fast. As I was finishing the 10th vial, I was shaking. I put the cap on the vial and held the cotton wool ball on my arm with some pressure. I sipped on some water and then held the cold bottle against my head. I was sitting down, but I felt as if I was about to collapse. I spent maybe an hour sitting motionless, trying not to pass out as my vision blurred occasionally. Eventually, I pulled myself up, collected the vials, and put them in a small box. I had to brace myself as I made my way through my house to get outside and across to the neighbor's letterbox. I placed the box in and hurried back inside. Like clockwork, just after when it showed up. Under the streetlight, I could see a crooked smile spread across its pale face as it opened the box and looked inside. It scurried off into the darkness, and I collapsed into my bed. I checked my wallet when I woke up and the $4,250 was paid to my Bitcoin address. The following email was short like the rest. Delicious. We like it. One more liter next Tuesday. There was no way I could give another liter, especially with just over a week to recover. On waking up, I felt weak and fatigued. I replied back to the email. Hey, I need some time to recover. I might be able to do it again next month. Almost instantly after sending it, I got a reply. It read, Number 1 liter next Tuesday or else. I felt my stomach sink. What does it mean by or else? This thing is clearly deranged if it's eating blood, so I have no idea what it's capable of. I sent an email back saying sorry and that I can't do it. A few seconds later, it replied with the same message demanding 1 liter again or else. I left my computer at that point. There was nothing more I could do. The week passed and ID felt drained across most of it. Just low energy and occasional head spins. It came to the Tuesday and I didn't draw any blood. I sat by my window in the dark as at 1 o'clock ticked over. Out from the darkness, I watched it scurry to the neighbor's letterbox. I opened the top and paused for a moment. It started to push some of the letters inside around with agitation as if it was digging under them to see if anything was there. It stopped and stared up to the sky and let out a loud, raspy hiss that cut through the quiet night as if it was yelling in anguish. It looked around and stepped away from the letterbox. It looks like it didn't get what it wanted. I told it in the email. There was nothing I could do for it this week. It took a step further towards the street, and just as I was about close the curtain, it stopped and stared straight at my window. I froze and tried not to move. All my lights were off, so there was no way it could see me. Its pale face and long white fingers dangling out of the baggy black hoodie faced me for what felt like an eternity. I was frozen in fear. Whatever this thing was, it was not human. It turned its head again, but to the neighbor on the far side's house. It paused for a few moments, and then started walking straight across my neighbor's front lawn towards his house. I couldn't see it anymore from my bedroom window, so I ran out of my room into my shower window where I could see out to the neighbor's side yard. I looked out, and it was climbing up the side of the neighbor's house in a fluid motion. Its hands seemed to just stick to the wall as it pulled itself up. It reached a window, and I heard the glass smash as it punched it in and pulled itself through. Moments later, I heard my neighbor start screaming. It started as him yelling for it to get out of his house, and then quickly shifted to incoherent screams of terror. And then, bang, bang, bang. I heard as the terrified screams continued with 3 small flashes lighting up behind the window. The screaming raised to a shrill high pitch and then stifled out, and it was silent. I started from my shower window to the neighbor's window, frozen. Was it dead? That was 3 gunshots. No lights were turning on in the house. I stood there frozen, paralyzed in fear. 2 minutes passed, then its long white fingers came from inside the room gripping the windowsill. It lowered itself effortlessly out and back to the yard and ran off through the backyard and into the woods behind. I could hear sirens slowly growing louder, and in the corner of my eye I could see several lights on the street had switch on. The noise would have woken the whole neighborhood. I stared at the woods. I could feel it was there, just on the edge of the darkness. The sound of sirens had now turned to flashing lights, and I turned my gaze to the front of the property. 2 police cars had pulled up, and there was a small crowd of people in their pajamas gathering out the front to see what was going on. I threw some shoes on and went out my front door and joined the crowd. Everyone was startled and repeating to each other they heard screaming and gunshots. For police officers forced the door as there was no response and had entered the house. There was some yelling inside the house, and one of the officers came out and told everyone to clear back as he called in for an ambulance and backup. A few more police cars showed up, and they started to run crime scene tape around the front yard and push everyone back. I was close enough to see when the ambulance wheeled him out. He was completely pale and looked unnaturally thin. The whole side of his neck was ripped open like it was attacked by some kind of wild animal. I listened into the paramedics as they were talking to one of the officers after loading him into the back of the ambulance. The paramedics were saying they have never seen anything like it before. They said he was almost completely exsanguinated, like his blood had just dried up and disappeared. Several neighbors were talking to the police about what they heard, and I overheard an officer tell one that there is no sign of bullet holes in any of the walls. But there are casings, so the home invader must have been shot and is likely wounded, which means it's likely the police will catch whoever it was. This was giving the neighborhood some reassurance, and the police seemed confident saying this. But I watched it pull itself out of the window. It looked like it was in no pain, and not injured at all. It made its way effortlessly out of the window, down the house, and without as much as a limp escaped into the woods. Now would have been the time to tell the police everything, but I knew that this was my fault. I gave it his address. I put the blood in the letterbox. I had it keep coming back. Am I an accessory to this? A police officer asked me if I had any information that could help, and I just mumbled I heard gunshots and yelling. I quickly made my way back home. I locked the doors and went to bed. It was a restless night. The following morning I checked my emails, and there was only one new one, and it was from the creature. I shook as I read it. Your neighbor was not as delicious. 1 liter next Tuesday or you're next. No more pay. Feed me or die. I emailed it back. I made it an offer, a way for me to live and be free of it. I can't give it 1 liter of my blood every week. I just can't. It's Saturday as I'm writing this. I still feel weak, and I don't know if I can draw much more blood for it. I'm reaching out here for help. If anyone has AB negative blood, I will buy your blood for Bitcoin. Just message me where you live and your Bitcoin wallet address. Leave a 100 milliliters vial in your letterbox before midnight on Tuesday. I'll organize for it to be collected. Second story. There are Wikipedia entries on the dark web. I found an article about my life there. You have Googled yourself at some point or another. Admit it. There's nothing shameful about it. It's not worse than what I did. I searched my name on the dark web. Don't ever make that same mistake. I was 19 years old then. Liv, my girlfriend, and her family were kind enough to let me live in their guest bedroom at the start of that year. They liked the fact that I could fix most of their computer problems. Liv is a great person, and what she saw in a hacker who could never survive for long in the 9-to-5 world is beyond me. Their house was in a suburb only a few blocks away from a library and coffee shops with free Wi-Fi. These locations were convenient for my burgeoning career as a digital outlaw. I used those resources until I was able to move out and get a small apartment of my own. After a string of demeaning jobs and abusive bosses, I found financial independence. I did this after I learned how to buy and sell things I shouldn't have with the use of my Tor browser. I engaged in illegal transactions, such as ordering counterfeit money and stolen IDs. I discovered there was a large market for manufactured psychedelics. I often went to the skate park to sell those items off the nethermost landscape of the World Wide Web. Business was good. A young man with years spent in foster care, I sought out activities which gave me a sense of control. A childhood of not having any will do that to you. The ability to navigate the online world to get almost whatever I wanted afforded me a sense of power. It was all going well until one evening in July. Asterisk. I sat on the second level of a Barnes & Noble bookstore in a corner next to the self-help section. I always did my best work there. The place was starting to go under, and I did not have to worry about an influx of patrons. Despite having a disguised IP address, I never wanted to risk a raid at home. The items were always shipped to a P.O. box instead of my unit number as well. In retrospect, these were all flimsy safety measures. They still gave me a sense of comfort, even if they were a tad delusional. I made sure there were not any cameras mounted near where I sat. It was a small space out of the way of the general public. Hiding in plain sight was always my preferred method. I drank strong coffee out of an oversized styrofoam cup. After 15 minutes of searching, I grew bored. I typed in my name, Joshua Wells. An input of my identity on that part of the web should be an indicator of how successful and arrogant I have become. I did not expect Wikipedia to be among the results, but it was the third link down. The first one involved a ghost tour in New Jersey. The guide had a similar name. The second was a gore website I was not interested in. While I may have been a thrill seeker, I was not out to consume media which capitalized on hurting others. I clicked on the third article link because of the title. It was about a television show. It read The Short Life of Joshua Wells. At first, the title did not startle me, since there are plenty of others with the same name. Recaps of 10 episodes were on the page. The first paragraph illustrated how the series did not continue past season 1. I read the summary of the first episode for the sake of passing time. Episode 1. Joshua's father is a known and feared gang member. His mother is a helpless addict. She attempts to use their own son as a drug mule on a plane flight from Boston to California. She has hopes of making a profit by dealing narcotics to a major criminal enterprise on landing. The authorities intercept them. Their son goes with CPS. He goes to a safe harbor for kids. The synopsis struck me as very close to home. Who wrote or directed the show was not listed, but it did state the air date. The month and year given matched the era when an identical set of circumstances had befallen me. The name of the center I went to was even called Safe Harbor. I was too young to remember much, but the facts were precise. I gulped and tried to shrug it off as an unusual coincidence. I read the second episode summary. Episode 2. We follow Joshua on his 15th birthday. He goes to a juvenile detention facility for the first time after he attacks a teacher by throwing a desk at him. Although he missed, the instructor still presses charges since he did not like the student much. He befriends a troublemaker on the inside named Ian. They escape, but not before a massive brawl with the other teens ensue inside of the facility. It ends with the two captured. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. It was uncanny to me how similar the events were to my own experiences. A slight dizziness overtook me, but I went on to the third, unable to keep my eyes from skimming. Episode 3. Joshua is free. Joshua decides to break and enter an old man's upper-class home after scouting the place for days. His goal is to take the mini Rolex watches from the top drawer of the old man's dresser. When he enters the house, Joshua discovers how the owner did not take his vacation cruise trip as planned. The man was asleep in his bedroom until Joshua wakes the victim by accident. Joshua runs away. He gets chased by the homeowner outside, where the elderly male dies of a heart attack in the street. I felt my chest tighten. It was all true, but I had never shared that story with anyone before. It was one of my most guilt-ridden memories. I read the next two. Episode 4. Joshua has nightmares of the old man crawling out of a ditch and choking him to death. He complains about night terrors to one of his counselors, who recommended a doctor. He ends up selling anti-anxiety pills after he does not like the way they make him feel. A girl he asks out overdoses and goes to the hospital. While she survives, he feels terrible, but not enough to stop dealing. He takes his earnings and buys a PC. He takes lessons on how to breach other people's privacy from a group of credit card thieves he met in a mall. Episode 5, Joshua discovers the dark web. He uses it to hustle low-level street drugs at first. He later reads headlines about some of his accomplices getting arrested. He still continues to engage in illicit activity. I looked at the air date for episode 6. It was the 24-hour period I was living through. Episode 6. Joshua goes into a bookstore to poach their internet and to try and make some money. He does not realize there is a man with a shaved head in a Carhartt t-shirt below him perusing the sci-fi aisle. The stranger is actually an undercover FBI agent. The government worker has a microphone and camera attached beneath his shirt. He is surveying for the perpetrator, even though he has not singled out who he is looking for yet. An arrest commences where they tackle, punch, and taser Joshua. They place him in handcuffs. My hands shook. I stood, gripped an Eckhart Tolle volume to appear less conspicuous, and opened it. I leaned my head over the railing to stare at the ground floor below me. A man who matched the description given by the article was there. His shirt was baggy and hid what I knew to be a gun on his hip. He held a paperback in his hands. I pulled out my phone. I pretended to have a conversation with an imaginary business associate about stocks. I folded the laptop with my free hand and went down the escalator. I strolled towards the back where there were stacks of hardcover tomes on history. I found an unsecured door and walked through it. I was in the warehouse. Unopened boxes were stacked all around. I did not spot any workers and made a run for a rear entrance. Asterisk. I sprinted down a wide alleyway between the building and rows of motels. I passed an art gallery and liquor store before my heartbeat slowed. Along the way, I found a closed vegan restaurant called Belendi's Eatery. The place was black on the inside, but its neon sign still glowed. A picnic table sat on the lawn out front. I stationed myself there. I opened the laptop again and connected to their free Wi-Fi without issue. I scanned the rest of the chronology. The remaining episodes were all future time periods. I wipe perspiration away from my forehead as I read the rundown of the next episode. Episode 7, labeled a darknet market operator in the media. 3 of the 7 charges thrown at him lead to convictions. This includes conspiracy to traffic narcotics. He gets out early after he agrees to cooperate with different agencies. He becomes a consultant for cybersecurity awareness and a social engineering expert. Following a keynote speech given out of town, he comes home. His girlfriend Olivia and her family have been murdered. My eyes strained and I felt my breath grow shallower. Episode 8, Joshua navigates her house. The walls had dried blood. Every corner's vandalized. Olivia's throat is slit. Her body is over the couch in the living area. Her parents had socks stuffed in their mouths and deep stab wounds on their stomachs. Joshua calls the police. He's treated as the #1 suspect in the media for days on end. He is finally cleared, but the psychological damage is too much to bear. I pondered the words. Though I was still young, it is true that Liv meant everything to me. Episode 9. Joshua goes to psychiatric ward. He stares at the padded walls as though they will converse with him. Detectives do visit him with the hopes of gleaning some kind of further information. They tell him they know the aftermath of the massacre he stumbled upon was the work of an active serial killer. The murderer has remained unidentified. Episode 10. Joshua leaps out the window. He breaks his ankle. An adrenaline dump allows him to move across the field and onto the nearest highway. He goes out into traffic. A long-haul truck careens around him and takes out a line of vehicles. He goes to the nearest lake, where he weighs his own pockets down with stones. He waits until nightfall and walks out into the abyss. The last image we see is his hand breaking the surface of the water. Starlight glints on his skin before his fingers submerge below the surface. His last few swallows of water create pockets of bubbles which rise to the top. I absorbed what the rest of my existence would look like. For black SUVs pull up and circle around me in the parking lot. Men in black suits and the undercover agent from the bookstore ran at me. Even though I did not resist, they still threw me to the ground. They dislocated my shoulder and kicked me in the jaw a handful of times before they cuffed me. Asterisk. I did get time reduced in prison after I agreed to cooperate to catch people like me. After my release date, I have tried to revisit that link without luck. I fail to understand how that article existed in the first place. I have read how high-level stress can open up insights and portals into the unknown. I would bank on the latter, though sometimes I think it isn't for me to know. I do not want to give in to what destiny has written for me. My escape from the bookstore has given me confidence that I can change the outcome of the dark web's prophecy, even if only for a little while. Or did I only extend the inevitable for a fraction of time? Fate, especially in regards to our stories as individuals, is not written in stone. It is malleable. I tell myself this positive thought is the only thing which keeps me going. I should visit Liv's house now. She has not answered my texts all morning. Third story. My brother disappeared into the dark web. When my brother Noel went missing last year, the police were of little help. They told us not to worry, that it was far more difficult to disappear than it was made to look on TV or in the movies. Most people turn up on their own after a while and their families find out, or pretend to find out, that the missing person's life was a little less respectable than they had claimed. A little bit darker and more mysterious. Some people live two lives, and nobody knows it but them. I did my own research and found this much was true. According to statistics, the chance of abduction by a stranger was less probable than being struck by lightning. You were much more likely to be kidnapped by someone you knew, and far more likely still to not be kidnapped at all. But despite their vague assurances and unfounded assumptions, Noel never did come back. The weeks and months went by, and there was no word. It seemed like the police had given up or forgotten about him. Digging through his belongings, I tried desperately to find something that would give a clue to his whereabouts. His computer was the best bet, I figured, since it was where he spent the majority of his time. Noel had worked as a database specialist for a big company named Proteon, and despite the fact that he had explained what he did to me a number of times, I never could properly figure it out. If people asked, I told them he was a computer programmer, since that was at least something most people could understand. He was an expert at assembling and troubleshooting computers, since my dad had owned a PC repair business when we were kids and Noel had taken quickly to technology as a child. He was building machines for my dad's customers in his spare time when he was still in his teens. Later he went to college for computer sciences and only become more proficient over the years. Lately he'd been experimenting with app design in his spare time and had gotten pretty good at it. He had told me he was working on one app in particular that was extremely different from anything else on the market. I had hoped the other programmer he had been working with would know something, but I tracked him down, and that resulted in a dead end as well. Upon meeting the guy, I found he was a peculiar, disheveled-looking Satanist who refused to make eye contact with me and offered no useful information. He told me Noel had been of great help in his project, but said the rest was top secret. I went home defeated once again. Noel's old computer was set up on my desk, so I turned it on and sat down, resolved to do some more digging. I logged into his email. Luckily, Google had saved all his passwords, so I didn't need to try to figure them out through impossible guesswork. Searching through his old emails, I had found a lot of junk mail. There was correspondence with work and family and a few with friends, but nothing that gave any clue as to where he might be. If anything, they painted the picture of someone living an ordinary life, making plans for the future, with no indication of wanting to disappear. His phone had been left behind too, and I went through that as well, looking for anything strange that stood out. But there was nothing. I sat there at my desk with the mouse in my hand for days and then weeks, looking for anything of use. I pored through his DOC files and JPEGs, MP4s and MP3s, PDFs, and every other damn file type you can imagine, examining everything, desperately searching for some hint, some clue. Everything turned out to be a dead end. Of course, I called the police frequently as well, but they were of no help and eventually went so far as to tell me to stop calling, saying they would update me if they found anything. I had cursed at them furiously and hung up, and that had been the end of that. I went back on his computer one night to dig through some more file folders, and I noticed something that my eyes had scanned over in the past. An icon in the sea of icons that lived on the busy and disorganized desktop. It looked a bit like a purple onion with a slice cut out of it. I clicked on it. A dialog box with a loading bar appeared briefly, then a purple window opened up that looked like a web browser. I realized that was exactly what it was. Tor browser, it said at the top. I knew little about these things, but understood that this was an untraceable way to use the internet, since it encrypted everything being done online. Thinking back, I remembered Noel talking about using Tor. He said it was much safer and couldn't be traced. But why would he care about being traced? I had thought at the time, maybe there was a good reason after all. Suddenly my cell phone chimed, and I went over to it quickly and looked at the message. It was a URL. Another text came through. This one was a typed message from someone. Enter the URL on Tor. Another ding. Another message. Tell no one about this. If you contact anybody, I'm gone. I'm your only chance at finding him. I looked at Noel's computer. That was when I noticed the little lens at the top of his monitor that was the built-in webcam. The red light was on next to it, indicating it was recording. Someone was watching me, and they could see what I was doing on the computer as well. I was sure of it. I texted back, doing it now. After typing in the URL exactly as instructed, the screen turned into a login for a website of some kind. I received another text. Password is his favorite movie. You have 2 minutes. I didn't need 2 minutes for that at least, since I knew it was Fight Club, as it had been since that movie had been released. My hands were shaking as I typed the password into the box. I was beginning to feel very concerned, but also a bit hopeful at this sudden turn of events. A chat window opened up and a message promptly appeared from someone named Shadowcat. Shadowcat, you're his brother, I take it? I typed back a response quickly, afraid of losing whoever this was. It felt like they could disappear at any second, back into the ether, and I would never find them again. Mark, yes. Do you know where he is? Shadowcat, yes. I was a little confused as to why my name was appearing in the chat window as Mark, since that wasn't my name, and I had never entered any identifiers. Was that an alias that Noel used online? I wondered. Mark, is he okay? I took a deep breath waiting for the answer. Shadowcat, more or less. Mark, what do you want? Shadowcat, you'll find out soon enough. Another message came through, showing another URL. Shadowcat, keep chat open. Create a new window and go to the URL. Mark, okay. I typed in the URL and found myself at another website. It was a bit like eBay, except instead of selling old records and jewelry, people were selling guns, explosives, drugs, and some very disturbing categories of pornography. Mark, what the hell is this? Shadowcat, never mind your questions for now. Do what I say or he dies. Suddenly an image appeared, replacing the chat window. It showed my brother Noel chained to a wall in a stressed position. He was blindfolded and gagged, but I could hear his muffled screams for help. My hands were shaking nearly uncontrollably now, and I had to type and retype my reply several times before it made any sense. Mark, how do I know you'll give him back? Shadowcat, trust me or don't. The choice is yours. If you refuse, he dies. If you do what I say, I will give him back to you unharmed. It seemed there was no other option. I felt trapped and hopeless, depressed in the horrible situation I had found myself in. If I called the police, he would see me do it on the webcam. If I said no, he would kill Noel. Shadowcat, you have 10 seconds to decide. A countdown began on the screen. Shadowcat, 10. Shadowcat, 9. Shadowcat, 8. Shadowcat, 7. Shadowcat, 6. Shadowcat, 5. Shadowcat, 4. Mark, okay. Shadowcat, good. Here's your shopping list. Get everything on it. A long list of items was included next, and my eyes widened further as I read through it. Mark, what the hell is all this for? What are you planning to do? The chat window closed suddenly. I was left alone in my living room, my heart beating fast and hard in my chest. Only the other website remained now. The one with black market guns and explosives and everything else illegal that you could have delivered to your doorstep. I debated calling the police again, telling them these new developments, or even going to the police station. But what if the kidnapper found out? He obviously had ways to spy on me. Probably you'll say I'm an idiot for what I did next, but I really wanted to get my brother back. So I filled the online shopping cart with the requested illicit items and entered my credit card information, cringing as I hit enter. I guessed I would have to cancel my credit card, since I didn't trust the vendors one bit, but at least that part was done. The package arrived in the mail surprisingly quickly. As soon as I had brought it inside, I got another text message. It invited me to another chat on Tor, where I was given a physical address. They said to meet them there with the package, and they would give me back my brother. I was to tell no one where I was going. It was dark by the time I arrived at the old warehouse in the industrial section of town. The place was abandoned, and there were no lights to illuminate the parking lot as I pulled in. My trunk had some cargo in it that would surely get me a couple decades in prison, if not more. Terrified, I sat in my car, still gripping the steering wheel tightly with both hands despite the car being turned off. I had no idea what was going to happen next. My cell phone chimed and I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was a text message. Come inside through the east door. I did a bit of quick geography to determine which way I was facing and decided that was the door I was looking at, right in front of me. Taking a deep breath, I got out of the car. I popped the trunk and grabbed the duffel bag I had brought with the illicit items packed inside. The gravel crunched beneath my feet as I made my way across the parking lot. My hand shook as I reached out and grasped the doorknob, turned it, and went into the dark, cavernous space inside the warehouse. As difficult as it was to see outside, it was even darker in there. Taking a few more frightened steps forward, I found my eyes did not adjust to the darkness. The door clanged shut behind me and I jumped, feeling my heart skip a beat. Hello? My voice echoed back at me. Did you bring everything? I jumped, startled, when I heard the voice. It was raspy and high-pitched and made the hair stand up on the back of my neck at the sound of it, like fingernails across a chalkboard. Why, yes. Good. Bring it this way. Terrified, I stepped forward into the pitch blackness, unsure if I would run into something. I moved slowly and deliberately, hoping not to hurt myself. He's got it for us. He has it all. Yes. Suddenly I realized there was not just one voice speaking, but many. They were all around me, surrounding me in the darkness. I felt their movements in the air around me and heard sounds like the wind blowing during a thunderstorm. Poisons, acids, knives, explosives, boomed a voice from the corner. Gunsis and Bullitses and Sisnake venom. I heard them moving closer now, inching towards me. Their voices were in my ears as I backed away. "Where is my brother? Show him to me, or you get nothing." I was terrified, but determined to get Noel back, come hell or high water. "Or maybe we'll keep you as well, little brother. Maybe someone will want you back badly enough to bring us more offerings. More dark treasures." I could feel them very close now, could hear their breathing and feel their proximity to me, causing my skin to break out in goosebumps. My mind raced, desperate to think of what I could do to get out. These creatures, these demons, whatever they were, had no intention of letting me leave. I had a sudden brainstorm. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my cell phone. Quickly, I hit the button for the flashlight function. If there was anything these creatures would be affected by, I guess by their choice of habitat, it would be light. "These are demons born of darkness," my lizard brain whispered. "They are not accustomed to anything but blackness." The white light cut through the darkness like a knife. I heard screams and saw a brief haze of smoke appear. Around the edges of the light, I caught glimpses of vague forms and humanoid shapes. They recoiled from the light, and I felt and heard them moving towards me from behind. Spinning, I cast the light just in time to see one of the demons nearly face to face with me. His form was massive and bear-like, huge fangs and long sharp talons raised in the air, ready to slit my throat. His red flesh bubbled and burst open. He evaporated into a misty haze when the light hit him, screaming in a deafening baritone. "Arg!" Realizing that the light had the power to destroy them now, or at least to send them back to hell where they came from, I spun round and round with the light, trying to incinerate them all. I saw some flying bat-like away. Others jumped up to the high ceiling and hid in the girders and beams above. I saw something at the other end of the huge space, and I shone my light that direction. It was Noel. He was shackled to a wall on the far side of the warehouse. He was gagged and blindfolded, unmoving. I saw dark shadows around him, moving quickly, and realized it was more of the demons guarding him. Running over towards him, I heard the sounds of more of them chasing after me, racing like monkeys across the steel beams above, matching my speed. I blasted the demons with bright light from my phone as I got closer to him. Their shadow skin began to sizzle and burst into flame, and they howled like banshees and moved away. There was no key for the chains holding him, but I was prepared. I grabbed the bolt cutters from my bag, a last-second impulse buy from my trip to the hardware store. Part of me had worried that the people I was dealing with would not let him free willingly. I had wanted any advantage I could get. The bolt cutters went through the chains with an effort, and the one holding his wrist snapped with a satisfying noise, and his arm fell down limply to his side. Before I could think too much about what that meant, I spun around at the sudden sound of movement behind me. I screamed as the claws of something terrible raked across my back. The demon disappeared back into the shadows above us, leaping into the air like a bat, and I saw flapping wings as it went back up into the rafters. I pulled the blindfold and gag from Noel's face and saw he was barely conscious. It felt terrible to do it, but I slapped him hard across the face to try and get him to wake up. He groaned and stirred but didn't open his eyes. I felt a sharp pain in my neck, suddenly like knives there, and I spun around quickly again to try and catch it in the light. There was a hint of smoke as my flashlight caught the edge of it, but it was too fast and quickly disappeared again. I was suddenly feeling frantic and terrified for my life. They were becoming more bold. My hand stung after the next hard slap to Noel's face, but it accomplished what I needed. He woke up and spit blood from his mouth. "Oh, what the hell? Noel, wake up. You need to hold this light. Move it around. Keep them away." It took him a few seconds to understand, but I thrust the phone into his hand anyways and began to work on the other chain holding his right wrist. His eyes were wide with fear, and his gaze darted around the room as I continued working on the chains. The one holding his other wrist snapped with an effort, and I got down on the floor to work on the shackles attached to his ankles. He was moving the flashlight around frantically, but it seemed to be working. Warm blood trickled down my neck and my back from my injuries, and I felt it turn cold on my skin. "How the hell did you wind up here?" I asked once he was finally freed from the chains. "That damn Satanist programmer. He summoned those things from hell." "What? How?" "Never mind. Just, let's get out of here." I took the flashlight back from him and used it as a weapon, shining it every direction and often just in time as I saw the demons scatter from the light like cockroaches each time I swung it around. Once we reached the door, I threw it open to reveal the parking lot, and we ran from there as fast as we could back to the car. We had escaped, or so we thought. I wish I could say that everything is better now, that we fled from the demons in that warehouse and never saw them again. But those unnatural creatures knew no boundaries. They were not inclined to stay contained within the walls of that warehouse. And they were not pleased that we had escaped with their treasures, which I promptly dumped off at the police station. Anonymously, of course. Although I got my brother back, neither one of us will ever feel safe again. The lights in my home stay on all hours of the day and night now. Noel is the same way. I sleep during the day and surround myself with lights at night, terrified until the sun comes up again. What am I afraid of? You ask. A blackout, a blown fuse, a burnt-out light bulb, and they happen more and more lately. Always I see them in the shadows, waiting, watching, patient, for their chance, for the darkness to fall. Fourth story. Do not buy the lost Disney movie off the dark web. My daughter is obsessed with Disney. In fact, she doesn't want to be called by her real name anymore. She insists on being named after Elsa, Queen of Ice. She has all the merchandise and all the movies on DVD. Every time Disney releases a new movie in the cinema, she insists she has to see it. Frozen, Moana, Mulan, she knows it by heart and will spoil it if you ask her. Last Christmas I was at loss on what to give her. Encanto had just come out, and not only had she watched it 3 times, she already had bought every single piece of merchandise that came with the movie. "Surprise me," she said with a wink, when I begged her for gift ideas. After weeks of racking my brain, I decided to just search the internet for the perfect gift. Before long, I came across an old video borrowing site just off the edge of the dark web. There was an old Disney DVD for sale. It was made in the old 2D animation and not the new 3D state-of-the-art animation like the modern Disney films. It was advertised as the Lost Disney film, something they made but never released. In fact, it had no official title. The website simply said, "The Lost Disney Movie. Available now." It was relatively cheap too. Only $25. With free shipping. It came just in time for Christmas. Elsa squealed in joy when she ripped open the wrapping paper. "I thought I watched everyone," she shouted. "This one's special." I winked at her. Elsa insisted on watching it the moment we finished dinner, and I obliged, running it on the old TV. The movie was nothing really special. Just the same old Disney plot. A princess lives on an island her entire life, finds a handsome, shipwrecked prince, falls in love, etc. Honestly, it was the cheesiest thing I ever came across. But Elsa loved it. She wanted to watch it again and again. "It's bedtime, darling," I said at last, when the clock struck midnight. "No," she whined, her eyes still fixated on the screen. So I yanked the plug out of the television. Elsa still hadn't moved. Her eyes were still glued to the screen. I couldn't help but peek at the screen. My heart dropped to my stomach when I realized the movie was still playing. The characters were dancing and laughing across the island. Elsa? It's time for bed, sweetie, I called out again, shakily. This was not normal. I reminded myself to call the electrician when Christmas was over. Later, Elsa muttered without looking at me. The characters were still laughing on the screen. It was like they were laughing at me. The next morning, the movie was still on the TV. The long cord snaked across the room, the plug grinning at me. Elsa had not moved. Her jaw was slack and her eyes were red, and she was as still as a statue. Elsa? Breakfast, I said. Elsa did not respond. I stood in between her and my television set. Elsa? Breakfast, I nearly shouted. Elsa still said nothing. A dribble of saliva ran down from her open mouth. Her pupils were dilated, and her face was throbbing. It had only been one night, but it was as if she had not slept for many days. Leave me alone, she gurgled sleepily. This was not normal. Nothing I did would make her stop watching the movie. Dragging her away was impossible. It was like she was glued to the spot. I tried throwing a blanket over it, but it caught fire and crumbled to ashes on the floor with a hiss. Finally, desperately, I tried to smash the TV, but the hammer simply bounced off the glass. I swung the hammer again, but this time the hammer crumbled into smithereens at my feet. The cartoon continued to play, every word a taunting reminder of my attempts. In the end, I gave up. Nothing worked. I kept a wary eye on her as the days slipped by. Then she started changing. Her face grew as white as bone. Her skin grew translucent until I could see the inside of her. Her eyes were pale and bloodshot, her jaw too slack. She barely responded when I called her name, and she grew more interested in the film, sliding closer and closer as the days went by. Then one day all was silent. I called Elsa's name, but she did not even grunt. Then I made the mistake of looking at the television set. There she was, frolicking happily on the island with the characters, a blur of pixels on the screen. I screamed her name and banged on the screen, but it was like she couldn't hear me, like she was there all along. I kinda regret buying the Lost movie off the internet now, especially since I lost my daughter. Too good to be true, as the saying goes. How I wish I had heeded that warning. Especially since as I pen these words, I hear my daughter's sweet voice from the television set, inviting me to watch the movie and be with her, frolicking on the island paradise like the old days. Should I? Fifth story. I found a link buried on an old dark web forum. I wish I never clicked it. The dark web. The name itself is a meme. It's become the boomer boogeyman, the back alley of the internet where you go to get your kidneys harvested and sold off to a billionaire's all-you-can torture buffet. It's the skeezy part of town, the no man's land of the digital world, chock full of society's most vile scum. It's also pretty boring. See, the dark web really isn't that much different than the surface web. Sure, it has a cooler name and better privacy, but most people use it for the same shit. Social media? Check. Shopping? Check. Pirating movies? Duh. Did you know Facebook exists on the dark web? You do now. My parents are terrified of the dark web. They speak about it hushed breaths, sort of like Ron Weasley talks about Lord Voldemort. It's as though they think uttering its name too loudly will invoke the wrath of some serial hacker, just waiting in the wings to delete their bank accounts. Ridiculous, right? I told them they were paranoid. To prove them wrong, I even downloaded the Tor browser and uninstalled Chrome. There's nothing to fear on the dark web, I said, so long as you've got half a brain's worth of sense in you. Now I wish I could take it all back. I stumbled across the website after a long night of drinking. I'd been out with Jared, my best friend since childhood, reminiscing about the good old days of driving Mrs. Crabtree up the wall. When I got home, I felt a bit nostalgic, so I went digging for old pictures on Facebook. Like most drunk missions, one thing led to another, and I landed on an old thread listing the most exciting websites on the dark web. Whoops. Most were fairly vanilla. Some free textbooks here, a bit of hacked video games there. I scrolled down through the responses until I found one buried beneath the others. It had just a single upvote. Monster Call 143D1.onion. I stared at the link for a few seconds, then cracked a fresh beer and said fuck it. The website was plain, mostly white text on a black background. Across the top was a banner emblazoned with the words "Call your monsters." I cracked a grin. It was kind of cute, in an edgelord, emo kid sort of way. After clicking through a few menu links, I landed on the Order a Monster page. It said that, for $99, they would deliver a personalized monster to a doorstep of my choice. Free shipping, too. The flavor text read, "Perfect for getting even with terrible bosses, backstabbing friends, and childhood enemies." I laughed. The idea was absolute gold. They even had a Monster Call guarantee of same-day shipping. How they managed to pull that off, I had no idea. Maybe they had a network of paid actors, patiently waiting to dress up in Halloween costumes and say a few canned lines on somebody's doorstep. Or maybe it was like Build-A-Bear, where you got to design your own stuffed version of ghouls like Dracula and the Wolfman. Whatever it was, I decided I was far too drunk to give a shit about how they made it happen. All I knew was $100 was a damn steal. I smashed the order button, and it brought me to a follow-up page titled "Design Your Monster." I practically licked my lips. This was the juicy bit. The website gave me a drop-down list of selectable options based on modifiable body parts. The mouth, for instance, had fangs, broken teeth, no mouth, multiple mouths, and too many teeth. I thought the idea of too many teeth sounded ridiculous enough to be awesome, so I picked that and went down the list and selected the rest of the monster's attributes, including its body type, its subspecies, and finally its power. The next page said leave a message. I mulled it over for a few minutes before deciding to keep it simple. I typed "boo" into the text field. Once I was finished, I clicked complete and it brought me to a new screen that made me jump. It was a webcam video of me staring shocked at my laptop. The stream was live. At the top of the page, a red text banner proclaimed "Perform the blood sacrifice." I cocked an eyebrow. What? As if in answer to my confusion, a list of instructions faded into view on the bottom of the screen. 1. Utter the name of your recipient. 2. Pierce your skin. 3. Consume your blood. I burst out laughing. This was too wild. Not only were they gonna deliver a monster to somebody's doorstep, but they were gonna include a goofy ritual video too. Alright, I decided. I'm game. I went downstairs and grabbed a knife from the kitchen drawer and headed back up to my room. Holding my hand up with a coy grin, I pricked my thumb with the tip of the blade. "Jared, make you," I announced dramatically. I stuffed my bleeding thumb into my mouth and sucked it clean. Then I held it up, drunk and proud, as evidence of my dark ritual complete. Seconds passed and nothing happened. Then, the screen went black and a new page appeared. Order complete. Delivery in progress. I sipped my beer, wondering how Jared would react to my spooky surprise landing on his doorstep tomorrow. I really hoped they included the blood sacrifice bit. Jared and his wife, Alyssa, both hated blood, so they'd never let me live it down, and that was exactly what I wanted. A couple of seconds later, a new screen popped up. Delivery complete. Stand by for results. Already? That didn't make any sense. How did they manage to create my order and ship it across the country, all in the span of 5 minutes? A depressing realization swept over me. My drunk ass had been duped. There was no way they'd be able to ship something that quickly, so the only explanation was A, it was a scam, or B, it was just some lame email jump scare. Fuck. Now the $99 made more sense. There was no way a tiny startup could offer same-day delivery and a compelling product for so little money. It was a pipe dream logistically. Defeated, I decided that was enough dark web shopping for one night and time to pack it in. I closed my laptop, brushed my teeth, and hopped into bed. My phone vibrated. I stared at it, wondering who would be messaging me at this hour. Jared, maybe. He was just as drunk as I was and probably high as a kite by now, too. I picked it up and saw one new email from MONSTRCLL. Odd. I never gave them my email address. Order delivered. Click here to view results. View results? I heaved a sigh. This was either a virus or some guarantee that Jared got a corny, spooky email. Still drunk, still making poor decisions, I clicked the link and it opened a video feed of Jared's house. I sat up, my tiredness vanishing in a tidal wave of what the fuck. The video was dimly lit, and the way it bobbed up and down looked like it was being recorded off of somebody's cell phone. Jared's small, two-bedroom home was there in all of its suburban glory. Something about the video felt off, though. Wrong. I told myself to relax. This was just some prank or gag. The company probably put out a call for a fraction of the money to any locals, and somebody pulled the contract. No doubt they were going to walk up the front steps, knock on his door, and then say boo and run off or some shit. It wasn't a big deal. So why was my heart racing? The video neared the house, the footsteps going slowly. In the silence of the night, I heard the person behind the camera breathing. They sounded frightened, scared. Why? Lights went on inside the house, painting the windows in a dull yellow glow. I squinted, seeing dark shapes darting behind the curtains. Thoroughly confused, I decided to message Jared and ask if he got my surprise. Terrence, sup dude, you get my special delivery? Haha. Jared, Jared, squithing. Jared, inside the house. Dark splotches splattered against the curtains. A moment later, a woman's scream rang out, and the window shattered. Two hands reached out from behind the billowing curtains, gripping the side of the windowsill. Then two more gripped the top. A figure emerged, lurching out of the opening and into the yard. It looked familiar. Jesus Christ, it looked familiar. It stood 8 feet tall, with large bat wings flared out behind it, and 4 crooked, muscular arms clenching in and out of fists. The person behind the camera stumbled backward, muttering something incoherent. The creature swiveled its head toward them. The video feed shifted. Images of the sidewalk flew up and down as the cameraman ran full tilt from Jared's house, heaving panicked gasps. I caught muffled fragments of prayers. Then a shriek sounded, followed by the flap of powerful wings. The video crashed, tumbling in a blur of pixels. A man's voice shouted for help, and then something heavy crunched, and his voice died with a wheeze. Another shriek filled the night, and a shadow appeared, gazing down toward the discarded cell phone. It had 4 arms, a pair of wings, and a mouth filled with rows and rows of teeth. Too many teeth. I lurched forward, swallowing the vomit in my throat. In one of the creature's arms was a 30-something man, struggling wordlessly against the monster's might. His chest looked like it had been caved in. The creature leaned towards him, pressed its teeth against his face, and slowly bit down. The man's legs kicked and jolted as the beast's teeth began rotating like a blender, tearing his flesh from his skull. It dropped him there, convulsing and dying, then beat its great wings and took off into the sky. Moments later, I heard confused shouts. Footsteps pounded against the pavement. More hollers. People called for the police. Other neighbors told children to get back inside. I put my phone down, horrified. It had to have been a joke. There simply was no way that had actually happened. It couldn't have. It was too gruesome, too violent. That was digital effects all the way. It had to be. They were great at those these days. Weren't they? The next day, I got a call from Jared's parents. His mother tried to talk, but she couldn't get past the tears, so she put Jared's father on the line. He explained that something terrible happened last night. My heart slammed in my chest. What happened? I asked. I told myself to relax, that there was nothing to worry about. Monsters didn't exist. I knew that. Terrence, he said quietly, this isn't easy to talk about, and it's harder to hear, but last night somebody broke into Jared and Alyssa's home. Police think it was sometime around 2 in the morning. My jaw hung limp, my hand trembling as I held the phone to my ear. A terrible coincidence. That's all it was. A terrible, horrible coincidence. I don't know how to say this, he said, so I'm just going to come right out with it. He took a deep, shuddering breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was as fragile as glass. The intruder that broke in? He mutilated them. Mutilated, I said in a small voice. Oh my God. Jesus. Yes. I'm sorry to tell you all this, but you were his. Well, you were best friend, and I think it's better that you hear this from me than the newspaper. He paused, as though summoning the courage to say the next words. According to the police, the psychopath that broke in gnawed their faces off. Vomit rose in my stomach. I forced it down. Oh Christ. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I ran a hand through my hair, gripping it forcefully and pulling on it, praying the pain would wake me from this nightmare. Please, Roger, let me handle the funeral preparations. You and Charlene should take this time to grieve, you. That's the thing, Roger said, his voice tremoring with emotion. There won't be a funeral. What? They're still alive, Terrence. That son of a bitch left them, broken and bleeding, to live with the torture he'd inflicted on them. He choked back a sob before recomposing himself. So far, there's no trace of the bastard. The only lead the cops have is a crumpled note they found on the doorstep. He left a note? Yeah, but it was just one word. Practically useless. I swallowed. What did it say? Boo. More. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.